I think that if you think about the, what we're seeing from a big chunks or themes perspective, I think what stands out to me a lot is that in the first few weeks, there was almost focused activity around, the shutdown, right? There was something concrete which was happening. It required an immense amount of focus from the entire leadership team. But as the weeks have been going by, I can see more, the conversations around more uncertainty. And the focus seems to kind of not be, that lasered. And it's kind of, this is that new phase of complete uncertainty and almost wavered. It's like, the focus has now gone into, okay, what does this mean for everybody? So I think this trying to understand what it means for me, for my business, is I think the phase that I see now more than that initial focus.
I would agree. I think if you look at our core, thesis, right? Change hits, value shifts, money moves, and talent gets disconnected. So the first thing I would say, at least in my lifetime and probably in our collective lifetimes, there's never been a bigger change that has hit and has hit collectively. It has hit everybody across the world in a similar way. And I think the dislocation to value is huge, and the talent disconnect in terms of what's the new work and who's going to do it and all of that is, we're in unprecedented times. If you think about the basic thesis of change hits, value shifts, and talent gets disconnected. And I have a sense that what I see out there is that the initial phase, what you're calling, Shefali, the shutdown phase, there's a lot of energy first, I think, around a little bit around personal survival. It goes there. And then my companies, there's a survival energy.
Yeah.
A laser focus on saying, hey, what do I do about cash and costs and debt governance and
health or whatever that.
So there is a big concrete thing that people are rightly gravitating to. And the whole idea of value creation, I think it's going from there to what you're calling uncertainty. I would say there is a little bit of a crisis of judgment. That is the phase I feel we are in. There's a crisis of judgment on how hard is it going to come down? How long is it going to be like this? And how fast will it come back? And I look around the world and I say, forget my friends and forget, the corporate world. If you just look at government leaders, people who have the world's best specialists, the best economists, the best medical people advising them. And I look at the judgments that different country heads are taking around the world. They're so wildly different to the same set of facts. And I think that's playing out in the corporate world as well. So the phase that I see right now staring us is, you've gone from the survival phase of, okay, and it's not like we are out of the survival phase, but I think there's a plan. I think people know what are the kind of things they have to do, right? I have, companies which are going after that cash thing. There's a plan. But this whole thing of what next, to your point on uncertainty, I think it's going to be really interesting to look at what are the calls that the CEOs take with the same set of facts. And why will this be different from how the world leaders have taken these wildly different calls? And I think if there is a human cost to what the government, decisions creates, and there is a very wide variation in the human cost of those decisions, I think we will see a similar wide gyration of value destruction or value preservation or new value alphas because of this same crisis of judgment. So I would submit to the two of you that, if we were to be useful in the world, how could we be today helping with this crisis of judgment?
Yeah, well, I strongly agree with everything that you both have said. And I think that, we, as you say, we've been talking a lot about the necessity for new tools to be able to reconnect talent to value when there is a change hits and the value shifts and the talent gets disconnected or dislocated relative to the value, and new tools are required. And I think what we're seeing is that the process and the tools that we've been working on applied in a lightweight, fast, focused way can really help people. And we've also talked a lot about bending the curve, and that when we look at what are the tools that a leader has to actually bend the curve, that I see a difference now, because all the curves that we have been looking at, because we've been in this extended period of economic expansion, that the curves have been up and to the right, up and to the right. And now you have a curve which is shaped very differently. So it's a curve that goes down quickly with a shutdown. And then, how long is it going to stay down determines sort of the trough, and then how much of it is going to come back when we reopen. And these are judgment points. And I'm watching the leaders now, as Shefali, as you were saying, that there was this focus on, okay, we've got to get it shut down. And we have to do that for medical reasons as well as economic reasons. We've got to get this thing shut down effectively. But there is this, there was, I think, a hope that the curve would be shaped like a V. And then there are these storm clouds that are gathering on the horizon that are washing over these choices that were initially made about, well, how far is it going to go down? Oh, well, it looks like we'll be closed for a month, or it looks like we'll be closed for 6 weeks, and we'll kind of figure this thing out. And now we're talking about 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 6 months, 12 months. How long, how deep is it going to go, and how long is it going to last? And how fast that storm is washing over to say, gosh, I mean, was the call I made about the severity of this thing, was it even close? And you're watching these world leaders struggle with it. I'm watching business leaders struggle with it big time. So, whoa, here it comes. And then if we're in for an extended thing, the focus shifts quickly from from cash, are we going to survive, to cost. Have I got a cost structure that is set up relative to how deep it's going to go, how long it's going to last, and what it's going to look like when it comes back? And then to your point, there is this really interesting spirit of innovation that is occurring at every phase of this. And we're seeing new ideas and new ways of thinking and acting and so forth that are coming. And so when we think about talent to value as a tool set for, in normal times, bending the curve, now we're talking about understanding the shape of your curve, because each industry, each business, very different. These become curve shaping tools. And how do I go about shaping it?
And I think, Sandy, to your point on, every curve was, to the right and up, up and to the right. But the curve, our value curve had a time axis of 3 to 4 years. Every CEO and business leader is looking at a 3-4 year time frame to bend that curve. I think people are now probably working on 3 time zones together. There is a 40-day time frame, and there is a 4-month time frame, and there is a 4-year time frame. And you have to take actions on all 3 together, right? And it's like you had a value over time axis, and your time axis just, broke out into 3. And the other place which I'm seeing, therefore, is that how much of you, and it's not like you can do them in sequence. You have to take the cash options, and if you want the trough to be long, you have to take the 40-day, the 4-month action, and by the way, the 4-year thing, you can't let that go off the cliff. So getting it back, so there are actions required at the same time across all 3 phases. And one of the things I noticed is that business leaders will also over rotate on one versus the other. So that will be the other crisis. It's not just picking your curve, but how I spend my personal energy on different parts of the curve today. And Shefali, you often talk about, and maybe you should, there is a very strong human. This is not a math exercise which is playing out. This is a judgment and a human exercise. And you were telling me yesterday about confirmation bias, and when you don't know what to do. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I find it fascinating. And from a curiosity perspective, I'm seeing, and I just want to say this focus and an opportunity. I want to put that together. And I have now been seeing all my clients who I'm working with, if there is a continued focus, and obviously the focus is moved from cash and shutdown to something which is an opportunity, and you can latch on to it, it changes the energy of all the meetings completely. So I'm Sandy, you probably know the client I'm talking about. It's a bit like, and I want to share just personally for us, for our business, the minute I went through that phase of shutdown, but the minute I saw an opportunity of going global for my business, the capability business, saying I would have at best had 8 workshops and helped 200 people. And if I suddenly thought of an opportunity saying, oh my God, now I'll have a virtual tool which can go, it's limitless if I think about it. And if I can change that focus from shutdown to that opportunity and remove that uncertainty phase in the thing and latch onto the next focus, oh my God, it is the power of humanity and the power of just human creativity is that bottled energy that you had never seen before. And I've seen that in a few clients where I can see them latched on to whatever that alpha opportunity is. Sandy, you know what I'm talking about here, but, and because the world has changed, people are going to accept certain things that they couldn't do before. If anybody wanted to come for my program, which is $20,000, they just assumed it's face-to-face. Now that assumption itself is not there anymore. So suddenly I have an alpha opportunity. And I've seen the play of the human creativity at its best, the genius of humanity and humanness. On the other hand, I've also seen CEOs who have completely lost their focus of shutdown and become, oh my God, got into this whole thing about, interestingly, about biases and what we go, if we don't know what to do, we do what we know and I've seen that people, if they're great at analysis of anything, they're getting deeper into the analysis. But it's uncertain. And so what analysis? So are you going to create 6 scenarios versus 3 that you're normally used to? And they're getting deeper and deeper into that, and they don't, because that's what they know. But it's creating even more uncertainty. So
yeah, it's funny, Shefali, I was talking to a CEO last night, very thoughtful person. And he said that when this started, he created 4 different degrees of difficulty that this was going to create for his business. And what he thought was plausible was scenario 1, 2. And he said, and he said, we meet now every day as a team and we look at it. It took us exactly like 8 days to get to scenario 4. Just like, and he goes, I just can't believe how quickly the whole thing shifted. And he said, now I'm working on a whole range of scenarios that 8 days ago were unthinkable. I mean, unthinkable. And now, like way over here. It's crazy.
And I think people, this whole thing of the new alpha that something like this presents. I personally think if we were doing our equivalent of an 8-day diary, like your CEO, I actually think for the big alpha, it's early. That's the sense it's just way too early to be talking about it because people are currently going through this. I underestimated it. I undercalled it. I undercalled it again. I undercalled it again. So they're going through this 8 days thing that you just talked about, Sandy. And I think there is opportunistic alpha right now.
Yeah.
I used to be a restaurant with with wine being my main sort of attraction. And I never delivered wine because I wanted people to come and buy it from the restaurant and therefore eat at the restaurant. I've suddenly pivoted to wine delivery because that was my brand.
Or wine club, yeah.
Opportunistic for now. I think the point I was basically making was that if you think about the 3 time, vectors that we talked about, the shutdown phase, is work that you have to do over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. And there is a reopen phase, which is dependent on how long you expect things to be quiet and a new alpha. I just think it's the sense I get when I look around is it's early for the kind of thing, Shefali, that you're experiencing right now with the capability business. I think you are an outlier from when I look at some of the other, where you've gone to a big pivot in your business, right? And maybe part of that is because your shutdown, it did not have to be as harsh, if you know what I mean. We are a secure business and so on and so forth. But people who are needing to spend energy, I have a firm that I work with, which employs across, close to 300,000 employees. And in the last 5 weeks, they have furloughed 100,000 people. It's just, I think, humanly not possible to be sitting there thinking, how am I going to kind of get back on the big value curve and really change the world and stuff like that? They are, of course, thinking of opportunistically, not losing their workforce, getting, what are the creative things they can do with cash and real estate and, so on and so forth. But I think if this was a weekly diary we were doing, I would say week 1 or week 5 that we are in, we are probably at that phase in the curve where every day people are realizing the severity of this and the fact that this is not a 4-week thing. I had a colleague, if you remember, our friend who's a CEO in China, and he specifically told me that he got a call. They run a restaurant business. They got a call to say on 19th of January, 1 day before Chinese New Year, that we have to shut down the restaurant chain. And he remembered thinking, could we extend it by 1 or 2 days because it's Chinese New Year and so on and so forth? But they made the right call and they shut it. They reopened on 19th of March. And I sat there thinking, okay, so this is going to be an 8-week thing. And I think as a business leader myself, and as I look at my clients, every day you're realizing it may not be an 8-week thing. Even if it's an 8-week thing, the overhang is going to be long. Maybe the curve is not a V or a U or something. Maybe it's a W. Maybe it's a sine curve, which will have a series of shutdowns. And I think those are the things which are, in my mind, sort of heavy. with the business
But
leaders
this is
right now.
and this I will stop after this. But I do believe what you're saying, Sumeet, is that if you're still in that focus phase,
Yeah.
if you're doing whatever with that kind of focus, then you need to be in there. And I think to your point, you need a bridge if you need to start thinking of another phase. Because it's very hard to be in that
Absolutely.
high focus and then also be a creative.
Yeah.
So I get that. I totally get that.
You can't
But
have survival energy and creative energy kind of, sitting in one pot.
And yet, necessity is the mother of invention.
And I guess that's the frame, right? Are you in a new necessity world, or are you trying to survive?
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly the spectrum.
I have to say, as a coach, you'll always be surprised at the human potential. When you're really pushed to the wall is when your biggest strength comes out.
But I love your thought about bridges. Let's not lose that for a second.
Yeah. And we should.
If this is hard, then I think as a CEO, you should be thinking of, I will need a bridge. I don't have an option but to think about all these three phases. And it is not humanly possible to think about these three phases together. So being really thoughtful about these bridges is a really cool thought.
And Michael and Luke, for you, just for context, we are actually creating workshops because the clients desperately need our help at this point in time. So we're creating workshops to help CEOs think through these three phases. And that's why we've been debating this design of the workshop to how do we create bridges, because you do want people to start moving beyond the shutdown and say, what does that mean for sustaining and for slightly medium-term thinking, because you can't be locked into shutdown.
It's the same thing you just said about transitions, right? I mean, I was struggling to get into this expansive thought leader world when I've just come from like a 2.5 hour, like you can't, it's just, you're a human being. It's what we are asking our business leaders for today. This is the big challenge of their careers. And, this whole thing of Jack Welch used to say that anyone can grow in the short term, or the long term. And I think it is hard. And we are asking our business leaders to actually have a 40-day, 4-month and a 4-year plan together and continuously, swivel between that. And I just think that's a human challenge. For which you need transitions
and bridges,
frameworks, and being thoughtful about it.